It's time for good energy, and I'm Dr. Julie at Endeavor Health and Chiropractic, and I'm gearing up for a cold weather walk this morning. So I just thought I'd pop on, and I wanted to share with you some interesting reading that has come into my space lately. Get the brightness on that up just a little bit. No, that's too much. I'm playing around with this new location to see what it does. So today we're going to talk about how a mouse teaches us about our stress response. So when we've been talking about the healing equation, remember the healing equation is energy to heal equals good energy in minus stressors. We have been looking at stressors in terms of actual events or actual impingement. We've been looking at it from gut microbes. We've been looking at it from stressors of people coming into your space. We've been looking at it from trauma, like slipping and falling, structural issues. But I want to look at it just from a slightly different perspective. I have been reading a book to my 7-year-old called, oh man, now I don't even remember the title. But it's about this governess who is teaching these 3 children who are, I'll put the title in the comments. But anyway, this governess who is educating these 3 children that were found in the woods that were raised by wolves. And she's educating them in classical 1900s literature. And she teaches them To a Mouse by Robert Burns. And we may not know that we know To a Mouse by Robert Burns. One of a famous play of Mice and Men is actually named after the play, named after a line in the Robert Burns poem To a Mouse. But more of us may know it from a bigger part of that line. So the best laid plans, or we in America know it as the best laid plans of mice and men, and often go astray. But actually, as it was written as the best laid schemes of mice and men gang after glee. And that is translated as the best laid plans of mice and men often go astray. But what we don't know is that if you don't know the poem in full, the line continues, and leave us not but grief and pain for promised joy. Robert Burns nailed it. Sometimes when life doesn't go as planned, we can't call farmers and go dum-da-dum-dum-dum-dum-dum and fix everything. We have a meshing of 2 things. 1, the plan we've created in our head, and 2, the reality of the event. And that, even if the reality of the event wasn't terrible, if it wasn't a stressor, if it does not mesh the plan, if it does not fit seamlessly in, and it's mixed up, that is a stressor. And so the reason why I bring that up today is that post-holidays, especially women who are hosting Christmas, or families, or even anybody who has an idea of what Christmas should be versus what Christmas actually ended up being. If you have a disjunction, if those don't meet, then we are stuck in a little bit of grief and pain. Robert Burns was right. The best laid schemes gang after glee, and leave us not in grief and pain, but promised joy. When the reality doesn't match with what we have in our head, we grieve. And we're now 2 weeks out from the holidays, and if we don't take the time to grieve what we set up in our mind as the actual reality, or what we wished in our mind that Christmas and the holidays would have been, and what the actual reality is, it's going to stay with us. A lot of us will push past it and say, hey, it's time to go back to work. I'm just going to go back to work, gonna do my thing and let it sit. But what you don't understand is that when those two worlds don't mesh, when what you have in your head and what actually happened don't mesh, there's a wound there. And that wound, no matter how big it is, if you just push past it and say, I'm going to rise above it and I'll be fine, you're reducing your energy to heal. That is a stressor that you are carrying with you. And that reduces your energy to heal, makes you less powerful, makes you less healthy. And so I want to talk about that and then connect that to something that I went to, well, that's what I wanted to talk about. But I also want to say that there's a way out of this. So taking the time to say, you know what, those two things didn't match. And I had in my head a view of what the world was going to be, and it didn't show up that way. Taking the time and sitting with that and just grieving it, grief and pain. Burns talks about going through the grief and pain for promised joy. We need to do that, because if we don't, we carry that wound with us. Back when I was teaching at Luther College, I went to a lecture by Parker Palmer. And Parker Palmer is a leader in spirituality and social change. He is the founder for the Center of Courage and Renewal. And he had in his lecture, which I can't even remember the name of the book. I'll put that in the comments too. He was talking about a book that he was just written about exploring your life and being on the right side of it. And he talked about being in therapy for many, many years because he was, an educator. He was doing all of these great things, yet he was depressed. He couldn't figure it out. And he had been in therapy for about 7 years, and then he switched therapists. And this new therapist gave him a completely different view on his depression. He said, Parker, you have been depressed for 8 years. What if it's not depression? What if what you're going through is a depressing? A depressing. You are spending 8 years, you were pressed, and now you are depressing. The sorrow is the grief and pain from that not meshing of reality with what you had in your head. And I always liked that phrase. Depression is the act of depressing. Pressing is injury. Pressing is a wound. Pressing is stress when two things don't match the way you had them in your mind. And so I want to just say that sometimes when we sit and depress, we can heal a wound or the grief and pain that comes from things not matching. And that can actually increase our energy to heal. So if you are sitting at home and you're 2 weeks out from the holidays and you're like, you know what, the holidays really didn't go the way I wanted to. I spent Christmas Day crying profusely, and I dropped I broke glass bowls in the kitchen. I was a wreck, and it wasn't because it wasn't the way I matched them up. It could have been, but I needed to spend time with that. I needed to grieve what I thought would be a perfect Christmas versus the one that was kind of evolving at the time. And if you don't grieve for what you have in your head as promised joy and the lack of it, it's going to stick with you. And it's, for some reason, the line, "The hole in my heart can only be filled by you," really stupid song, but there's going to be a hole left in your body where there's a wound that needs to be healed. If you don't take the time to depress, or in terms of Robert Burns, you don't take the time to grieve the pain of promised joy. So just to think about that stress response. When the world doesn't go your way, when you are a 2-year-old, you scream and you cry and you pound the floor And as adults, we're not supposed to do that, but we really should. I'm not saying go home and have a temper tantrum, but I'm saying go home and honor that feeling. That 2-year-old let that emotion out and it was gone. They were done with it. We as adults have a tendency to hold on to the comparison between the promised joy and the gang after glee, those things that sometimes go astray or often go astray. And when we hold on to that, then we get pressed, like Parker Palmer talks about. We get pressed. And then in order to depress, we have to go through sorrow to expand. And we can think about that depressing in terms of energy to heal. We can think about depressing as the expansion of your energy to heal. So being sad isn't necessarily a bad thing. We need to be that 2-year-old. We need to pound the floor. We need to cry. We need to, whatever you need to do to connect yourself with that grief and pain and get it out is much better than holding it in, because holding it in, even for the stupid reason that you ended up with 1 candle on your cake and you wanted 46, all right? It's a dumb thing, but sitting there and telling yourself it's dumb and sucking it in is not useful. You need to let it go. And even just to acknowledge it in your head, even to just say it out loud, even to just go outside and stomp the floor for just a little bit is not terrible. It's not terrible. We need to depress. We need to depress. We need to depress and depress, the opposite of depressing, or what depressing is expanding. It's expanding, it's growing, it's putting energy in amazing places to heal. So, if your holidays, gang after glee, often went astray and they didn't match, and you are feeling a little grief and pain, or you did at the time and then you kind of just closed it up and put it in a little box and sealed it up somewhere, you need to crank that out, and because it's pressed. It's pressed in there, but it's pressed in there with some emotions, and it's in various parts of your body, and you're holding it, and it's not good for you. So you need to depress, or you need to expand. And that takes a little bit of 2-year-old temper tantrum throwing, a little bit of tears, a little bit of journaling. You can tell yourself that it wasn't realistic, that you wanted the perfect Christmas, but you still have the scheme and the promised joy that don't match up. The reality and the promised joy that don't match up. And that's a stressor. So take a few minutes, cry, write, scream, pound, whatever you need to do, but depress so that you have more expanded energy to heal. All right, folks, I will see you next week. Hopefully I will have read something fantastic and seen something fantastic to share with you. And I will have something to post on Good Vibes, but it's probably going to be tomorrow because I'm a little behind on time. Until then, if you are a woman and you are looking for how to do the healing equation with your feminine self, jump in or at request to join the healing equation group and fill out a couple of questions, and I'll put you right in there. All right. Till next week, take care.